Meeting called to order at 5:04 p.m.
Welcome, everyone, to the January 21st, 2026 regular meeting of the Richmond Rent Board. As a courtesy to others, we ask that you please silence your cell phones or any type of noise devices. Also, I have a few reminders regarding public comments. Individuals who would like to address the board, a request to speak card must be given to the assistant clerk before the announcement of the agenda item. If you would like to speak on an item not listed on the agenda or on the consent calendar, you must do so under public forum. Please refer to the Rent Board meeting agenda for the list of items or the agenda items list open for public comment, posted above the table located in front of the chambers. Also, this meeting is being interpreted. We ask everyone addressing the board to speak clearly and slowly for interpretation. The first item on the agenda is pledge to the flag. Please join me in pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is roll call. For the purpose of the recording, may I please get an audible roll call from Rent Board members and staff? Board Member Espinoza,
Here.
Board Member Height,
Here.
Board Member Willis,
Here.
Vice Chair Cantor,
Here.
Chair Tipton,
Here.
Executive Director Nicholas Traylor,
Here.
Deputy Director Fred Tran,
Here.
and General Counsel Charles Oshanuga.
Here.
For the record, all Rent Board members and staff are present. The next item on the agenda is Statement of Conflict of Interest. Are there any? Hearing none, the next item on the agenda is Agenda Review. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Are there any changes to the agenda from staff?
No changes.
Are there any other changes to the agenda from board members?
Okay, hearing none, no changes. The next item on the agenda is Public Forum. One second, we have a public speaker who speaks Spanish, and we're trying to make sure he has his card ready. He needs to speak now. Now. Yeah, if it's not on G, you gotta do it now. Sorry about that. She's trying to explain to him that he would need to speak now. 1 second, Cordell. It's okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda is public forum. Tonight, we have 2 speakers under public forum. Each speaker shall be allowed up to 4 minutes to address the board. When you are called to address the board, stating your name and city of residence is optional. Please terminate your address to the board when your time expires. We ask that you keep your comments respectful and appropriate. The first speaker is Mr. Cordell Hendler. He's
Thank you.
already here.
Yeah. So good evening, Chair Tipton, board members. For the record, I am Cordell Hendler, and I'm a Richmond resident. So I'd like to correct the statement from the November meeting. So as I was listening to the recording of the meeting, it's supposed to be Commission on Aging, AGING, Senior Winter Ball. So that was the only one correction. So that's one. Then coming up is you are all invited to the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference on February the 5th. It's going to be held at the Richmond Country Club. You have to RSVP by January the 30th. and the tickets are only $80 per person, and that includes dinner and food and a drink. So I'm like, hey, and dessert. So I'm like, please RSVP so they can tabulate how many people will be in attendance. That's one. And then coming up 2 days after that, the Richmond Community Foundation's annual gala at the Berkeley Country Club from 5:30 to 10 p.m. And the ticket's only $250 and includes champagne. And then one of the issues that I brought up last time is like, if you recall a few meetings back when we had the both parties came, they were like they were speaking too fast, and and I'm going to make it a sincere request that both parties can slow it down because it's hard for interpretation to they had to like wave the flag each time. And so if you can tell them whenever there's a hearing coming up, you have to remind them ahead of time that you have to slow it down so that way interpretation can follow. So, and let's see what else. That's pretty much it. So that's it.
The next speaker is Felix Mendoza. Please come forward. We're going to extend your time to 8 minutes because you will need interpretation. Okay. Go ahead. Oh, the mic.
Good afternoon.
Okay, no. Okay, so muy buenas tardes. So, básicamente quería expresar un punto. Pues por ahora soy dueño de una propiedad.
For now, I am a property
So
owner,
tengo inquilinos.
I have
Acabo de adquirir
tenants.
otra propiedad. Mi hijo adquirió una propiedad.
And my son has a property.
Igualmente, pues tiene inquilinos.
and he has tenants as well.
So, básicamente mi idea es
So my
esta.
idea is this.
Está pasando
So what's
de que es muy difícil
It's really difficult
poder ahora agarrar una propiedad cuando tiene inquilinos
To obtain a property
por la
with
protección de renta,
tenants
lo
because
cual
of
estoy
rent.
totalmente de acuerdo,
And
lo
I agree,
entiendo,
and I
porque también
understand.
yo he estado de este otro lado donde me toca que rentar
But we need
y
to
pues
rent them out.
qué bueno que haya gente que se
And
preocupe
it's good that
y
people
cuide que
worry
no hayan
and
landlord
take care
abusivos, ¿no?
so that we don't have abusive
Pero también
landlords.
quisiera que vieran de este otro lado,
But I would also like for you to
donde,
see this
por
other
ejemplo,
side.
yo que estoy empezando a invertir,
For example, now that I'm
me veo
investing,
totalmente amarrado de manos
my hands are
porque
tied
no
now
hay forma de poder
because I cannot
agarrar como una propiedad más como para
obtain
igual seguir creciendo el
another
negocio,
property to keep growing my
porque la
business
protección de renta es muy cerrada en
because
ciertos
the
aspectos.
rent is kind of
En el
closed in
sentido de
certain
que,
aspects.
por ejemplo,
For example,
yo sé que alrededor de $10,000 es como cuando se le paga a alguien
$10,000 is
cuando
what
tiene
you would
una causa
receive
justa uno
when
para
you
que
have a
salga.
good cause.
So, yo creo que pues ustedes han hecho un
I believe
estudio
you
para
have
saber
done some
cuánto es
research
lo que
to
se
see
les
how
da a las
much,
personas, que en este caso es alrededor de $10,000.
which is around
Pero yo creo que
$10,000.
debería de haber una opción para
And I think we need to
personas
have
que
an
quieren
option
invertir como yo,
for people that want to
en
invest
decir,
like
ok,
myself.
si tú quieres comprar una propiedad
Like, for example,
donde
if you want
está
to
protegida
buy a
por
property
la protección de renta,
that needs to be protected by
tienes que pagar, por
rent
ejemplo, el
laws,
doble.
and that
$20,000.
we need to pay extra, like
Yo sería
20,000.
feliz dándole
I would be
$20,000
happy to
a
pay
cada
$20,000
familia,
for
y creo
every
que
family.
las familias también lo apreciarían,
And families would
porque
appreciate it.
ellos ahora sí que agarrarían un dinero, creo que suficiente para que se muevan
And I think
y
that
puedan
would be
adquirir
enough
un
money
lugar
to move
más
around.
apto para vivir,
And it would
porque
be
el
easier
problema
to
que
live.
existe ahora es
Because
que
the problem
la
that exists
mayoría,
now,
okay, la mayoría de lugares
because the majority of places
están malos para vivir,
are really
porque
bad
los
to live
landlords no pueden invertir dinero,
because
no
landlords cannot
quieren invertir dinero.
invest and they don't want to.
Entonces, las condiciones de vida básicamente
life conditions
están bajas
basically
porque
are low.
los gentes que quieren invertir como
Because
yo
people that want to invest
no
like
tenemos
myself,
opción de decir,
we don't have
¿sabes
options
qué?
to say,
Esta
"You know what?
propiedad está
This property
mal,
is not
igual,
well,
pero igual a mí me interesa comprarla,
but I'm
renovarla
interested in
y que la
buying
gente
it,
tenga un
renovating
lugar
it.
digno para vivir.
And
Claro
for
que
people
es un
to have
diferente costo,
other options to live.
sabemos que no puedo yo rentarla
And
a la
obviously,
misma cantidad que se
I
renta
cannot
ahora
rent
bajo el
it
mercado,
under market
Y lo que
prices.
pasa es que la gente, como yo que quiere invertir,
But as a
no
person that
puede,
wants to invest,
ahora sí que invertir, renovar.
cannot invest and
¿El renovar qué
renovate.
significa? Necesito
And what does that
ruferos,
mean?
necesito teiperos, necesito los que hacen
Workers,
el piso,
the
trabajo,
floormen,
mucho
to
trabajo
work.
para la
There's a lot of
gente.
work for a lot
La
of
ciudad
people. And the city.
está mal, si
It's
vamos a cualquier
bad.
lugar, vemos muchas casas mal.
And there's a lot of houses that need
Exacto.
work
Vemos muchas casas mal porque no hay quien invierta.
because nobody
No se puede
wants to invest
invertir
in them.
porque no podemos tener un reingreso para atrás.
Because that way,
Si,
if we
si,
want to invest,
si
we
fuera
won't
algo
get
como
anything back.
que dijeran,
any gains.
ok, lo justo son $10,000
So
para familia,
what's fair is
dar la opción
$10,000
a
per
la gente
family
que quiere invertir.
for people that want
Si
to
tú
invest.
quieres sacarla sin una causa justa, no sacarla, sino
And if
negociar
you
con
want
ellos una causa justa,
to
pero base en ley,
negotiate to have a fair
dale
cause,
$20,000.
then why can't
Con
we just give
$20,000 creo que les
$20,000?
alcanzaría suficientemente
I think that would
para
be,
conseguir un mejor
enough
lugar, como les digo, más apropiado,
to find
limpio,
an appropriate
un buen
place
piso,
with a good
una buena
flooring,
calefacción.
good air conditioning.
Porque ahora muchos edificios que están mal,
Because there's a lot of
porque la gente
rundown
paga poco, pero la
buildings
misma
because people
condición
don't
de
wanna
vida
pay.
es horrible.
And their
Está mal,
conditions
techos
are
cayéndose,
horrible.
pisos
Ceilings
húmedos.
are falling,
Y los landlords no
there's
tenemos
humidity.
cómo decir yo voy a
And
poner
we can't say,
un piso nuevo, un
I
techo
can
nuevo,
put in a
si no
good
tenemos
floor,
una
a
forma de
good
poder
ceiling.
tener un beneficio, o sea, una
And-
retribución,
but what's not
porque no
working is
podemos
that we
solamente
can't
invertir
benefit and-
y no poder ni siquiera pagar mortgage,
and it's not
porque
fair
no
if
nos
we
da
want to invest, but we don't have enough to
ahora
come
sí que el
back for our
bolsillo,
mortgage.
porque pues
And
es muy
to
bajo
demolish.
el ingreso que se les cobra a los inquilinos
Because it's really
y ellos tienen una
low,
mala
the rents that
calidad de
we're
vida.
charging
So, básicamente
renters,
es algo que viene
our
rodando.
tenants.
Si nosotros tuviéramos esa opción
So if
de
we would
decir,
have
bueno,
that option,
que no sean 10, que sean
that
20
it's not 10,
opcionales,
but $20,000.
para que la gente pueda tener un lugar digno, un lugar
People would
bueno.
have a dignified place to live.
Inversionistas vendrían de fuera. En mi caso, yo seguiría comprando feliz de la vida,
And
dándole
I would be
$20,000
so
a
happy to
cada
keep
familia.
purchasing homes and helping more
Trabajo,
families.
¿se imaginan
And
cuánto
that's a
trabajo
lot of
pudiera haber?
work.
¿Cuánta
Imagine
gente
all the
no
work that I can help for other
compraría?
people.
¿Cuánta gente no diría, ok, voy a renovar mi edificio completo porque ahora
And
sí
I
está
can
libre
renovate so
y lo
many
puedo
more
poner a
buildings.
precio de mercado?
And I can
Pero
price
ahorita
it
no,
at
ahorita
market
estamos
price.
totalmente amarrados de
But right
manos
now I'm tied
los landlords, inversionistas,
as an investor
porque la protección de renta
because the rent
está
protection,
solamente con una visión,
it
no
only
con
has
otra,
conditions.
no ve de los dos lados.
It's not on
Y
both sides.
como les digo, yo estoy de acuerdo que haga una rent
And
protection
I
porque hay
agree
landlords
for rent
abusivos.
protection.
Y yo quisiera que pues, la gente que viva, digamos, en una de mis propiedades
And if there's people that want to live
tuviera
in one of
un
my
lugar
properties,
bonito, agradable, limpio.
to have
como yo
a
quisiera
dignified
vivir.
and clean place, a
Entonces,
place that I would
pienso
like
que
to
sí
live.
sería bueno como tomar en
So
cuenta
I
y
would
ojalá
really
lo
like that
tomaran
you
en
can
cuenta
take that into
de abrir
account,
esa puerta,
to open that door
de que alguien que quiere invertir
for someone that wants to invest
lo haga,
and that they
que les dé el
can
doble.
invest. ¿Cómo?
Creo que es algo justo para que alguien pueda
I would like
buscar
for it to
una
be
buena
fair.
otra propiedad
So that way I
es,
can look for more properties
decente,
that are
digna.
decent and dignified for people, for families.
Esa es mi idea
And
y
that's
pues
my
ojalá la
idea.
tomen en cuenta.
And I hope you can
Y
take it
créeme
into
que habría
consideration.
demasiado trabajo en esta ciudad.
And believe me, there's a lot of work in the
Serían
city.
cientos de edificios que la
And
gente
it would be so many
renovaría.
buildings that
Y eso
can be
significa
renovated.
miles de trabajos.
And that would create
Eso significa
1,000 more
dinero para la
jobs.
ciudad,
So that would be money
arreglar
for our
calles,
city.
arreglar todo.
To be
Créeme
able
que
to resolve
funcionaría
a
mucho
lot of
y la
things,
gente
and that would
con
work.
el doble de lo que está estipulado en ley ahorita,
And
creo que le
what is
alcanza
stipulated
suficientemente
right now,
para buscar un lugar digno
they would be
y
able
poderse
to find a
acomodar. Mucha
dignified
gente no se
place
sale a
and
veces de
help
las
more
propiedades,
families without
no porque
having
no
to
pueda
leave these
pagar,
properties
sino
because
porque
they
están
can't live.
acostumbrados a vivir en algo
Because they're used to
lamentablemente
living
feo.
In,
Pero bueno, ojalá que lo tomen
sad
en cuenta y esa
places,
es
and I
mi
hope you
propuesta.
can consider what I'm saying.
Sí, gracias.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that was the last speaker. The next item on the agenda is to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Board Member Willis, second by Vice Chair Cantor. I'll take a vote. Board Member Espinoza,
Yes.
Board Member Height,
Yes.
Board Member Willis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cantor,
Yes.
and Chair Tipton.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. We're now moving to item G1 under Rent Board as a whole. Item G1 is to receive a presentation on a proposed real estate disclosure policy / ordinance and direct staff to draft a proposed ordinance for the board's consideration and potential approval and recommendation to the City Council for possible adoption. There are 2 speakers on this item.
Thank you. We will now hear the staff report.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Tipton and members of the Rent Board. This item introduces a proposed real estate disclosure ordinance intended to improve transparency and reduce administrative burden for the rent program. So as usual, our first slide summarizes the core issue of what we were seeing operationally. And what we're seeing are residential rental properties that are sold without disclosure of rent-related fees or restrictions, which creates administrative burdens for the city and unexpected obligations for new owners. At this time, there's no fiscal impact. Staff will return to the board if additional resources are needed during implementation. So each year, roughly 400 rental properties change ownership in Richmond. In many cases, rent program fees, city fees, or other property-related or tenancy-related restrictions are tied to the property that are not disclosed at sale. Just a bit of background about previous board and staff action on this matter. The board and staff have attempted to address this through the realtor community beginning back in 2019. And while some progress was made, the approach was limited and it was inconsistent. As per the 2025 cooperation agreement between the rent program and the City of Richmond, we are mandated to bring to the Rent Board and City Council a proposed real estate disclosure ordinance that would address the issue at hand. So why is an ordinance needed on this matter? Because realtor forms are not universally used, staff believes a local ordinance is a viable way to ensure disclosures occur on all transactions. So the ordinance would require sellers to disclose 4 key categories of information that materially affect the property and the buyer. Those categories would include rent control, or the status of the property, whether it's under rent control and or just cause, any outstanding rent program or city fees that are attached to the property, rent or eviction restrictions that are tied to the property. So rent and eviction restrictions could be tied to the property. For example, if the previous owner did an owner move-in or withdraw from the rental market, and disclosing those restrictions is really important to saving many people a lot of trouble in the city trouble. Another category would be unpaid tenant restitution rewards. So you do have situations where a hearing examiner awards a rent reduction or rent refund, and restitution is owed to the tenant, but instead of paying the tenant the restitution, the landlord sells the property and the new owner inherits that debt. So disclosing those awards would be part of the process as well. So with all laws, you have to have enforcement mechanisms. So those would include, if the seller fails to disclose, the ordinance would provide civil remedies that place responsibility on the seller rather than the city or the buyer. So enforcement may include a private right of action by the buyer, statutory damages per undisclosed item, and recovery of attorney fees. In terms of the rent program and its responsibilities with this ordinance, the rent program would provide a standardized disclosure form within 48 hours of request. This form would not include personal identifying information, and we would coordinate with the city to update ownership records upon sale. The benefits of the ordinance include that it would protect buyers and successor owners. It would reduce staff time spent on fee collection, improve accuracy of rental housing data, and increase compliance and revenue. So the recommended action tonight is to receive a presentation on the proposed real estate disclosure ordinance and direct staff to draft a proposed ordinance for board consideration and potential recommendation to the City Council. And with that, myself, Fred Chan, and Charles Oshinunga are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members of the board?
I have some questions. So I'm curious a little bit about how this would be implemented, and sort of how so we have the enforcement mechanism, but what would be the oversight mechanism? Would it just be that buyers could report that they didn't receive the disclosures? Because given that there are, that not all sales go through a realtor or some sort of like centralized agency, and individual sellers obviously should comply with this ordinance, but do we have any sort of mechanism for checking that with the county, or would it be only enforced if the buyer reported or somebody reported proactively that this ordinance wasn't followed?
Part of this question might be better answered by Charles, but what I can tell you is that the rent program would obviously collect data in terms of situations where there's been maybe a violation of this disclosure ordinance, but it would be a private right of action that the new owner would take against the old owner. So really is the rent program's role would be in providing the necessary forms, doing outreach related to it. In terms of what we could do, there, I don't, other than perhaps tying it to some form of compliance, I don't see what role the agency could play in terms of enforcement. But Charles, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I don't have anything to add.
Great. So it sounds like then this would, in practice, where this would end up coming up is those situations where there is, significant uncollected fees or restitution owed to a tenant on a property. We go talk to the new owner. They say, I had no idea about this. The last owner didn't disclose. And it would just offer them a mechanism to get some compensation associated with the failure of disclosure, whereas right now there is no mechanism for that.
That's correct.
Okay.
So currently there is a mechanism. State law allows you to sue if you fail to disclose like a material aspect that may have influenced the buyer's decision to purchase a property, but this just adds another layer. State law provides the floor, and this allows us to make it a little bit more stringent. We've had, I wish Ramona was here because she can tell you better than I can, we've had multiple, numerous, almost uncountable instances of landlords, new landlords, who are just furious with the current situation because they are inheriting tens and thousands of dollars in unpaid fees and petitions And sometimes rental restrictions, owner move-in restrictions, Alice restrictions, and so this was obviously in response to a lot of landlord complaints to help the landlords out. But you're correct. The way we figure this out for the most part is that we send invoices to these properties because oftentimes we don't even know when they change hands because they don't tell us until we bill them, and then we learn it's changed hands and they're upset. And so yes, this will help hopefully dissuade or encourage at least some of the sellers to actually disclose.
Got it. Yeah, and I know we've seen that in some of our appeals. That kind of conflict has definitely been presented to this board previously. I'm wondering, so all property title transfers need to go through the county, correct? Is there any way to work with the county to, like, as part of that process, make sure that buyers are informed that they have a right to know this information? Like seeing that some of that is handled by the voluntary disclosure forms that the Realtors Association has provided, but that there is this case of individual sellers where it might not happen. Is there any way to work with the county to have a little more proactive compliance rather than just finding out about it after people have failed to disclose?
So in years past, because this has been an issue since the inception of the program, and in years past, I've taken on the responsibility of trying to coordinate with the county to at least inform us when property is changing hand, because that way we can have a more targeted outreach to buyers and sellers. And the county say they could not do that. The best that they could do is give us a list. I can't recall anymore, but to give us a list without any personal identifying information, just i.e. 30 properties were sold, currently, and we then we have another running list, I think, with the city, with taxes, and we kind of compare and contrast to figure out what property was sold, and then we send out packets to what we suspect are new owners every month, and we say, introduction to rent control. Hey, your property's under rent control and just cause, et cetera. So we do that, but beyond that effort, the county won't. Last time I spoke with them, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I understand that they might not be willing to disclose information about what properties were sold. I'm wondering if they would be willing to add additional material that they provide to new buyers when the title transfers happen. So they wouldn't need to give us any information, but the buyers could receive information that says your property, based on being located in the city of Richmond, maybe, that you, like, basically just instructing people to reach out to the rent program. That might be an easier ask. It might not be. I'm not sure.
Just based on my conversation, we can always ask. I didn't ask that specific question, but based on my conversation, I'm not sure if that's going to be an easy ask. You'll see, I think we have some speakers here from the association, and they're not the county, but that process wasn't a very easy ask process either. I think there's a lot of reluctance to take on any additional ownership of this situation on the county level and on the realtor level. And just one last point, because we did have, it wasn't in this presentation, but we've had numerous conversations with the county and the Realtors Association. And based on those conversations, we've decided, Nick and Fred decided to first target the seller in this ordinance to see how that works. And, after we were measuring it and trying to figure out the success of the ordinance, if it's not successful, then we intend to bring something stronger that includes realtors and everyone generally, because I understand not everyone goes through a realtor. The vast majority do. The vast majority use real estate agents, but we're not concerned if you're a real estate agent or a realtor or an individual. We're just concerned with anyone who is selling property, period, without distinction. But we will first start with the individual, based on our conversations with realtors. But it's imperative that everyone, including realtors, agents, and et cetera, are familiar with this law and are encouraging people to comply with this future law, because if they do not comply, it will be escalated to include everyone.
Great, understood. Thank you.
I have a couple quick questions too. This seems very common sense to me, so I was shocked that something like this wasn't already on the books. So it actually makes sense to hear you say that there is state law. So my first question is, what does us having an ordinance add to what's already covered by state law?
So the state law, in my understanding, is more just a basic contract. It comes from the theory of contract. You know, it's almost like a inducement by fraud, for instance, or a misrepresentation. And I can breach a contract and pull out of a contract if there's a misrepresentation that's material. And that's where the relief of state law provides you. It might provide you compensatory damages as well, meaning that if you fail to disclose something, like a roof that was leaking, and I mean, it's kind of complicated because the buyers have a responsibility to perform due diligence. They also need to be doing their due diligence. But if you fail to disclose a material aspect, and despite my due diligence, I was unable to identify it, I could sue. I could either breach the contract and pull out, or I can stay in the contract and I can seek compensatory damages, which means I can fix whatever needs to be fixed, and I can seek that cost from you, right, including like court costs. This proposed ordinance would add more penalties in the sense that there's a statutory damage now, so it's no longer just compensatory. It's every item you fail to disclose is $1,000. And then on top of that, there's an attorney's fees provision. Because this is a private right of action, individuals will need to go seek an attorney generally, but attorneys are costly. And on an analogous side, like on the civil rights side or the Disability Act side, you'll see that their attorney fees provisions are unilateral, right? So the plaintiff is only entitled to attorney's fees, and that encourages attorneys to take plaintiff's cases, right? And so knowing that if they win, they're going to at least get paid. So that's the idea there.
Thank you, that's helpful. My other question is, could we go back one slide to benefits of the ordinance? So that first one protects buyers and successor owners. I don't want to speak for everyone. I find that one the clearest. The other ones, could staff just in a few sentences each sort of explain those second, third, and fourth benefits, how those follow? I don't doubt them. They're just less obvious on their face.
Oh, that's a good question. So our staff spends a lot of time with new owners, explaining to them their obligations to pay the rent program fees if they're due. Or we end up spending a lot of time working with them while they request an administrative determination, try to get themselves free of the fees, claiming that they shouldn't, maybe they're not a successor in interest for whatever reason and whatever arguments that they have. But it requires us to spend a lot of time working with what would otherwise most likely be just regular invoice transactions where, you know, you're expected to get a bill and you pay a bill. But if you're receiving a bill that you didn't expect to receive, staff just has to spend a lot of time working with each one of those owners because they're upset and they want justice and they need to figure out what their options are. It just eats up a lot of our staff time.
So this would be sort of about front-loading clarity and transparency.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Was there a second part to your question? I'm sorry.
The
other-
improves accuracy of rental housing data and increases compliance and revenue. Same basic question.
Yeah, so when we bill a property owner and it changes hands, the new owner can then claim that it's not a rental property anymore, or that they shouldn't have to pay for the previous owner's fees. So we just end up having data that is either stale, inaccurate, or not up to date data, because we are essentially trying to collect on multiple fronts. Collect from the, we're not trying to collect from the previous owner, but we're trying to collect from the new owner, while at the same time trying to understand if the old owner holds any liability whatsoever. So,
Just to give you a little bit more background, in addition to what Mr. Traylor said, one of the unique things about the city of Richmond is that our housing base, a lot of it, is single-family homes, and they oftentimes are changing hands, and they're changing hands very quickly, and the seller is not informing us that these things are changing hands. And so part of this, incidentally, this, if you were to seek our forms, this would allow us, or at least inform us before the property change hands, that the property will be changing hands. That allows our outreach to even be more pinpointed. And if the buyer has an intention of, taking it off the market, we can at least anticipate that too going forward in the future. The same applies to duplexes, which also change hands, not as frequently as single-family homes. But yeah, just adding to that aspect.
I might be getting too far afield here, but so would this theory, would this disclosure apply to any property? What's going through my head is, for example, my home had previously been a multi-unit rental property and was sold as a single-family home, which was never disclosed at all. So I was surprised to hear from the rent board asking, is this still in the rental market? What's going on? So there was no disclosure at all, and I don't think that invoked any rent board issues, but I imagine there could be situations where it does. So would this kind of disclosure, it's not necessarily as simple, I don't think, as every building that it applies to being an obvious multi-unit tenant situation. So would it apply to every sale?
It would apply to every property that's a residential property where a government fee that is listed in the ordinance is incurred.
Okay, and then increases compliance and revenue. I think that one is a little clearer, but if you could also just say a couple sentences about how that benefit comes about.
Fred, do you want to answer that one?
To increase the compliance, essentially similar to what the general counsel says, is right now, transactional wise, we receive the information after it's already gone through, as in the new buyer will inform us. So with the compliance, the improvement with that is that we'll be on the forefront, where we'll assist with the disclosure of all the restrictions or outstanding fees. So hopefully the what is due, as well as how the property is classified, will already be settled prior to the transaction. So that will definitely increase the revenue upfront, as in if it's due typically by the seller, more likely the seller will settle it, or it could be a part of the escrow, however they settle that. But it will just be more impactful because the transaction will happen before the entire settlement of that property changing hands.
All right, thank you all. That helped me a lot. Board Member Willis, did you have a question?
Yeah, not necessarily about the ordinance as of right now. It's like our chair said, seems like a common sense thing. But I guess the primary comment is I do feel like at least somewhere in the city, it may not be every property, but they should have a list of properties that do have liens and levies and stuff like that on the record. So makes me wonder if there's a way to partner with the city just to have some of that information on the front end for the rent board for properties that we know are being rented out or have a business license. So if you do get a new buyer in who's a new landlord, some of that is already available to talk to them while this ordinance makes its way through the process. Because I feel like that might reduce some staff time too if you already had some of that on hand within the rent program.
Yeah, that's very accurate. When we did speak with the realtors, they did mention that there is a preliminary report, and on that preliminary report, typically it would disclose liens or some type of restrictions or possible outstanding fees. I did ask about it. I don't know exactly how we would be able to have our fees or our restrictions included on that. That may require further research, and it may align similar to what the vice chair's question was too, as to how could we work or partner with the county to try to get something on the forefront of this process.
And just to add, not every fee, it can be liened. Not every fee that can be liened is liened. And the city, for instance, like utility fees, for instance, I'm assuming the city prefers to handle that within its own confines. Whereas other fees, what you said makes sense. And although the action of this item is requesting the board to direct us to draft an ordinance and whatever else it says, that's not entirely correct. So when you're all ready to make a motion, what we're really asking for and what really has to happen first is that we work with city staff. So whatever policy comes out of this board, we would like to be directed to work with city staff, do community outreach, then present the findings to the council, to then ask the council to have the city attorney work with rent board staff to draft an ordinance, because only the city attorney can present ordinances. So that's the kind of direction. So we'll have more time to work together with the city staff and city writ large to kind of tease out some of the policies and see where the overlap is and where we can be more effective.
No, thank you. Yeah, and the last thing I say is I remember every single year they usually either sometime before or after the city adopts their budget and fee schedule, some of that they bring forward a huge list of fees or charges they're levying against different property owners. So if some of those also include rental property, which I know some of them do, it seems it would make sense to at least share some of that information with the rent program just to make the operations a lot more streamlined and simpler. So when those conversations do come up, it's already right in front of you for what property they're talking about. That's all.
Are there any further questions from the board? Seeing no further questions, Madam Clerk, are there public speakers on this matter?
Yes, we have two public speakers on this item. Will the public speakers please come forward? Renee Bartels and John Fondanazio. I hope Fanazio. Sorry. Okay, so the first speaker is Renee Bartels. You can come forward. You have 4 minutes to address the board.
Thank you.
And the mic should still be on. Okay.
Okay. Hi, I'm Renee Bartels. I'm a local realtor of 38 years and a broker for a good period of that time. I also have a property management department in Richmond, so we deal with the department quite a bit. I have just a real quick current situation where we sold a property and the owners thought that their fees were paid for 2025, and it got some confusing and they didn't get paid. It took me almost 2 weeks to get somebody at the rent board to explain to me what that period covered, and we found out it covers a fiscal period from July 1st to the next year. I was also told that that the departments don't talk. So when a property changes hands, you've got to contact more than one department to get this new information out, which I think is very cumbersome, and I think that should be fixed in the departments. I don't think an ordinance with more penalties on people is needed. Something I would like to see would be what homeowners associations do. The title company contacts the HOA, they submit a demand. You could submit a demand that says, here's the fees that are paid, here's the fees that are due, and to what point. Here's any assessments that maybe are going to a particular tenant individual, and all of these things can be handled through the escrow with a new enrollment form submitted back with buyer information. The title company prelim will pull any liens, but like attorney said, not all liens are going to be on the preliminary title report, like the fees or something like that. But I think there's education needed. Is there a place on the website that says sellers, here's your information, give this to your title company or your agent? And when title companies learn that they need to contact the Richmond Rent Board, but I think most importantly, they need to have somebody to contact that's going to respond in 48 hours. This issue I have going on from May 2nd, dealing with the district, to May 20th, I still didn't have the bills that she said she would send me. There was a new computer system going in, and there's been no follow-up from the rent board to send me the invoices I need so I can calculate for my seller what she owes the buyer when the buyer goes in to pay. And I followed up with the other agent today to find out the buyer still hasn't submitted the enrollment forms, and he promised me he would do it by the end of this month, and that closed in April of 2025. So it's not just seller problems you have here, you have buyer enrolling problems. And if we could get this centralized with the title company through education of the sellers, education of the agents, education of the title companies, and somebody in the rent board that will respond and get this information over, I think that would solve a lot of problems. I'm more than happy to give input on how things work on our side. I'm very proactive, which is why I'm still following up with this buyer to make sure these enrollment forms get submitted. And I've already informed my seller, you're gonna owe this money from this period to close of escrow because you didn't understand the billing that was sent out. Number one, they didn't get it. It was sent to the wrong address, and they didn't get it till January. So they thought it was for upcoming year, and they didn't need to pay it. So there was a misunderstanding, and I don't think they'd need to be fined $1,000 for a misunderstanding. Thank you so much.
Could come forward. And just a reminder that this meeting is being interpreted, so speak slowly and clearly. You have
That's a
4
tall
minutes.
order for 4 minutes, but
Thank you.
my name is John Fadnazio. I am the current president of the Contra Costa Association of Realtors. And I just want to say, just to kind of piggyback on what Renee said too, I think it's important that you guys understand the cadence of transactions. You know, we're dealing with transactions that are happening between 14 and 30 days. And during that period, you're going through an escrow process, and buyers or sellers are responsible for due diligence, as you mentioned earlier, Charles, and having the ability to disclose information. And that is happening at a very rapid rate. So the cadence of what you guys can do in this enforcement would help tremendously. Hearing what Renee just said, when you're getting information 6 months later after transaction, it makes it very difficult for everybody. What I want you guys to know is that we're here to assist in disseminating all the information that you're going to provide to us. Our role at the association is to educate our members and our realtor members, right? I have a question. I don't know if you can answer this question, and I have a response to something you said earlier. You had mentioned that you said about 400 transactions happened. Was that monthly or annually that are rental related? And I don't know if you can answer that question or not. Annual. And you said that a majority of those are not being compliant with this. So I just was curious to know if you had that number and if you could share that number, just because I'm just curious, out of 400 transactions, you know, how many of those are not compliant? I don't know if you can answer that or not. That's fine. because I think it makes, you want to know efficiencies from what you guys are trying to accomplish here. If it's 10 out of 400 versus 200 out of 400, that's a big chasm that you want to, address. And Charles, to answer your question about this information, trying to get information from the county, it's public record on every transaction that closes. If you don't have a relationship with your title companies or here locally in Richmond, I can get that information on my phone if I walked out here in the lobby. So getting that information on transactions that close in the last 30 days, 15 days, 10 days, it's instantaneous. So I'm just saying that's public record. If you can't get that from the county, find out and get that from your title company. Thank you.
That was the last speaker on this item.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Can I ask some follow-up questions since the public speakers?
Yes.
So I'm curious about the idea that the speakers floated about working directly with title companies. I don't really know anything about how this works. I don't know how centralized it is. Is there one title company? Are there many title companies? Like, is that a potential point of intervention where we could get the information to more people by coordinating with them rather than trying to coordinate with the county or finding out, or like individual realtors?
Nick, you want to take that?
I don't know the answer to that question, so I'll have to look into, whether or not the title companies can provide that information as instantaneously as it was portrayed to be. But we do, on a monthly basis, go over the role of properties that have been sold, residential properties that have been sold in Richmond, and we send out a packet to each one of those owners, and they deal with each one individually to let them know that this property may have been a rental in the past, there may be fees due, so on and so forth. So we do that on a monthly basis. And perhaps that information is accessible through different means, but we do it through the county.
Yeah, sorry, I actually was asking about something different, but I'll let you respond first.
Yeah, so I don't believe we reached out to the title company. There's more than one title company, and you can ask the speakers if they want to speak on it to more directly answer your question. So, but we haven't done that. I will say on the county side, the reason we are getting the information is because of the PRA, but the PRA takes time. You don't PRA something and get the information the same day. And for the county, it takes a lot of time. So to short circuit the PRA process, they're giving us information, but it's more, it lacks enough indicators for it to be efficient. The county, on the title side, again, this ordinance is seeking to have sellers disclose prior to the completion of transaction. And I'm not entirely sure what the information that the title would provide us. I think it'd be more of us telling the title, you need to provide this information, but the only way that could happen is, I suppose, having the title contact us in every single transaction. And if they want to do that, sure. I doubt, just like the Realtor Association didn't want to put this in their form in every single transaction, I doubt the title is going to want to take on more responsibilities. But we can certainly contact them. And like I said, you can also speak to the speaker or ask the question to the speakers if you want, because they definitely have more expertise than I do in this transaction process.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about it as a different way for us to get information about what properties have sold. I was thinking about it as a process that every single real estate transaction goes through, right, is working with a title company, whereas they don't necessarily, like they all work with a title company, they all work with the county, right? They don't necessarily all work with realtors. And so I believe one of the speakers mentioned that the way that it often works for HOAs is that the title company will proactively reach out to the HOA and say, are there any outstanding fees on this property? And if we can get the rent program added to the list of people that they would reach out to prior to transferring the title. My concern is I want this, if we're making an ordinance, I want it to actually stop the problem from happening and not, it's good to give people another mechanism for compensation if it doesn't happen, but I want there to be a way that we can intervene in every single transaction ahead of time so that no one buys a property that has tens of thousands of delinquent fees and then has to, ruin their life for the next 6 months trying to figure out how to fix this situation. So
Yeah, I think
that's my curiosity. I think I would appreciate it if we do move forward with this, if staff would be able to explore that option.
I think one way you can do this is because again, these are policy options, or these are, I guess, policy considerations that we're asking the board to then direct us to work with the city for an ultimate ordinance. If the title solution works, who knows if you actually need an ordinance, right? So I think perhaps one of the solutions is to direct staff to contact the title companies and then report back here at our next board meeting to let the board know whether or not the title companies are willing to do what's being suggested. But I will say there's more than one title company. It's just not one centralized title company. So but yes, if the board want to do that, so temporarily put a pause on the policy considerations and just do some homework on the title, absolutely. But this has been a 5-year process, and every year it's met with a new idea. We're willing to keep doing it, but I hope it works.
Yeah, and I don't see the two as being mutually exclusive. I don't think that, I think that there could be an ordinance, and then we could also work with the title company to see if they are willing to be part of the process to ease the administrative burden on sellers. But it doesn't, I don't think it needs to be one or the other, personally. So anyways, I'm done. Thank you.
Yes, that's fair. I think just add it to your motion, but I think it's important for us to come back and update the board in 30 days to let you know the process of the title company at least.
And I also had a follow-up sort of question / comment. I appreciated the public comment points that education is needed on both sides, and also the reticence to add an additional statutory fine. So I guess what my question is, to the extent that these disclosures aren't already being made in the way that they should be, is that primarily a matter of bad faith, or is it primarily a matter of lack of education, inadvertence, confusing processes? Because if it's confusion, then an additional sort of punitive fine isn't going to address that. It's just going to be punitive. But if it is bad faith, then that fine might make a difference. I don't know the answer to that. To the extent staff is dealing with these matters on a sort of day-to-day basis and helping folks navigate this, you might have a better sense of that. But it is something I would like to see sort of considered and addressed, depending on what our motion is in future conversations. Whether that's a draft of the ordinance that maybe adds a bad faith requirement for that statutory fine or whatever that might look like. I think it's important to address.
Thank you. Right now, I don't know if it was mentioned, but part of the policy would be if a seller were to request the rent board for all this information, and it'll be like a form with a bunch of check boxes. If there's an error on the rent board side, then the buyer has no cause of action. So that's one layer that's already put in to protect the seller from bad information that the rent program might provide them, or late or stale information. Your other point, so one more time, I'm sorry, Chair Tipton, about your point.
Yeah, just that if sellers are not disclosing things they're supposed to be disclosing, is that because they're confused and it's a complicated process, they can't get the info in time, whatever? Or is it because they're intentionally trying to hide things? Because that $1,000 statutory fine is only going to be effective in one of those scenarios.
Gotcha. Thank you for the reminder. Yes. And so my second point was we send invoices, and these invoices let all these sellers know how much is owed. And so I think the presumption is you knew you owed the government this much money and you did not tell the buyer because presumably it would make your transaction less attractive, especially when you know you haven't been paying us tens and tens of thousands of dollars for over several fiscal years. When we have landlords who come in or new buyers who come in, oftentimes are new landlords, they are inheriting not just the past fiscal year or the current fiscal year, they're inheriting 4 to 5 years of unpaid fees. And we've sent these owners to collections, these past owners. So, I mean, I think the presumption would be bad faith. Lastly, we've done so much outreach on this. We've done a lot of in-person presentations, not only just to realtors and real estate agents specifically aimed at them, we've also done to potential buyers and potential sellers. So there's been a lot of education, but just as it often is across the board, whether you're a landlord, tenant, or whatever category of individuals you fall under, people tend not to seek out the information until they're either in trouble or they're in need. And so it's kind of how it goes sometimes.
Are there any further questions? All right, is there a motion? And just as a point of clarification, we had the original recommended action, and then we've also discussed some additional possibilities.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to draft a proposed ordinance for board consideration and potential recommendation to the city council, and to first return to the board within 30 days sorry, let me start over. I would like to direct staff to work with local title companies to see if there is an opportunity for collaboration on making sure that disclosures go out, and to return to the board within 30 days with the results of those discussions. And simultaneously, I would like to direct staff to draft a proposed ordinance for board consideration and potential recommendation to the city council.
Just on that second half, the first half, yeah, I get it. The second half, instead of the language here directing staff to draft, we're actually seeking direction to work with the city staff to discuss these policies and engage the community and go to the council for a presentation of these policies.
But it would still return to the board?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. So then I'll change the second half of it to direct staff to work with city staff to create a proposed ordinance.
To engage the community.
To engage the community.
With the policies presented here.
With the policies presented here, and ultimately draft a proposed ordinance for board consideration and potential recommendation to the city council. Great, that's the motion.
I'll second.
I hope I got it.
Yeah, there's a recording.
It's
We can
everywhere.
find it
There
later.
is a recording. Well, I'm going to take, so I have a motion by Vice Chair Cantor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, I'll take a vote. Board Member Espinoza,
Yes.
Board Member Height,
Yes.
Board Member Willis,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Cantor,
Yes.
and Chair Tipton.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if I got it all. I do know that I do have the motion stating that for your directing staff to work with the city, to engage in community, I guess, to have in community engagement for the policy proposed here. You also mentioned to work with local title companies to collaborate with their, that's the part I missed, but I'll listen to the recording. To collaborate, to work with them with their process, with their process. And
To report back to the board
And
within
report, that's
30
what I have.
days.
I was going to say that next. And to report back to this, to the board within 30 days. Did I miss anything? A
That's
little?
perfect.
Okay. Thank you. Motion passes unanimous. Okay, the next item on the agenda is reports of officers. Are there any?
There are none.
Okay,
Meeting adjourned, 6:09 PM.
6:09. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.